Brian Dubow had everything that was supposed to make him happy: career success, money, prestige, validation, and he was miserable. So he did something that most people don't. He quit. He stopped. He took up the study of the science of happiness and he rebuilt his life from the inside out. Today, Brian runs Hit of Happiness. He teaches at UCLA and he coaches high performers to build discipline, clarity, and meaning into their daily lives. We talk about the systems that create well-being, the cost of ignoring your own inner state, and why happiness isn't a reward, it's the starting point of your journey. This episode is a fantastic conversation. It's a real manual for anyone who is ready to stop chasing and start building a life that actually works for them. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Brian Dubow. Hey, Brian, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me on The Conscious Entrepreneur.
Thank you for having me, Alex. This has been a while in the making, so it's meant to be.
Yeah. Well, it's an important topic. The topic is happiness, and you run this organization called Hit of Happiness. You teach a really cool sounding class at UCLA Anderson around how to get people feel more alive and more in tune with who they really are. So that's super awesome. And I think there's a lot of stuff that our listeners are going to be able to learn from you here today. Why don't we kick off with like how you made this move and how you decided that being a happiness expert was going to be the thing that you did? I know you came from previously more of a corporate background. So how did that transition wind up happening for you then?
Yeah, so I definitely wasn't the kid growing up who said, I want to be a happiness trainer and coach when I grow up, So honestly, growing up, I was really just following the path. My dad is an accountant and CPA, and I grew up thinking, all right, I'm going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. So started my career as an accountant. I did my CPA and Masters of Accounting and started at PwC in deals consulting in New York City. And it was a great career, learned a ton within the first couple of years. I was in the rooms with CEOs and CFOs at a very young age. They were taking advice from me as a 23-year-old or 24-year-old. But fast forward another couple of years, and I got to this point where I just started questioning pretty much everything. I was getting everything that society told me should make me happy in terms of I was making more money than most of my peers. I was early promoted and being told that if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'll be on the partner track and they'll take care of me. And, I'm a keeper, they would say. I had parents who were super proud of me, which I like their validation. That makes me happy and feel secure. And then if I looked at my social media, it had me traveling all over the world, staying at fancy hotels and, expensing lavish meals. So everything that society tells us makes me happy, I was attaining. Yet when I looked at the reality of my life, I was working 80 hours a week. Realistically, I was on a plane every Monday to Thursday. I was pretty burnt out, lacking a sense of purpose or meaning, and looking for more. My weekends were spent escaping. If I had one day off a week, it'd be getting pretty drunk at a bar in Brooklyn or something. So I realized that this isn't it. This isn't sustainable. Like, there's no way humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years so that I can do this for the next 40 years. So if this isn't it, that woke me up to the question of what is it? What is it? And so that was the beginning of my, I don't know if it's a self-help journey or awakening journey, but I started reading all the books. I started having coffee chats with all types of different people, living alternative lives, entrepreneurs, executives. I talked to artists, I talked to athletes, people who appeared to really be fully engaged with their lives, fully inspired. And one of the most impactful conversations I had was with this doctor out of Harvard. His name was Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, who's one of the lead thinkers on the science of happiness. And at the time, he was teaching the most popular class at Harvard, which was on happiness. And this was before happiness was cool, Alex. This was, before COVID. So, okay. I had a coffee with this guy, Tal. I thought it'd be 15 minutes. It was a couple hours. And by the end of it, I was like, whatever Kool-Aid this guy's drinking, I want to drink that Kool-Aid too. So I spent the next year studying under him to become a certified happiness trainer and coach. And I never thought that this was me starting a business. It was more of, I had always learned, like, pay attention to what you pay attention to. And I was paying attention to this idea of how can I be the best version of myself. And so I was just following my energy. And a year later, I would say, while still working that same exact job at PwC, a year later of being very intentional, learning what actually makes us happy, my happiness went from like a 3 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10. With a main takeaway for me being happiness is an inside job. And that I was giving so much credit to my external environment and saying, when I get the next promotion, then I'll be happy. Or when I get that house with the white picket fence, then I'll be happy. Or the marriage, or all the things, the car, we're all chasing these external things. But in reality, it was by changing my day-to-day actions and habits that allowed me to feel like a much better version of myself and love myself a lot more. And so from there, my life has just been a bunch of almost synergistic micro pivots that I could never have planned for. But I started coaching on the side because I was like, if this can work for me, why can't this work for other people? At PwC, I switched into the Human Capital Center of Excellence. So there, I got to build a business case for happiness in the workplace and start leading workshops on happiness. And it started with small teams, but eventually I was leading workshops for the entire New York metro market, which was 2,000 plus people at a time. And, something that really stood out to me is that when we had workshops on mindfulness, 50 to 100 people would show up. On the first workshop on happiness, 2,000 people showed up. So there's something to the word happiness that gets people in the room. And especially a corporate audience where it's like mindfulness, they may think hippies in robes, versus happiness. They're like, oh, that's me. I want that. It's a thing that everyone wants and a thing that money really can't even buy. It helps.
Yeah, everyone's chasing happiness. We're all taught that success breeds happiness, right? That the external conditions of our life is what will lead us to feel a certain internal state. And what you're saying is, no, it's an inside job. So it's an internal state itself. When you were doing research on this, Brian, and when you were talking to all these people and then working under that Harvard professor that you mentioned, like, what were you seeing? What did the research say? What did your experience say about the links between happiness and external success? Because external success is what everyone thinks they're after. What's the real story here?
Yeah, so I really like to point to a study by Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky, who's a professor at UC Riverside. And what she found was that 50% of our happiness is genetics. You have no control over that. That's, how we were all born.
It's chemicals in our brains.
Chemicals in our brain. And, some people are like, oh, then I'll never be happy. But no, regardless of what your baseline is from your genetics, 10% happier to you feels the same as 10% happier to me. So it's going to feel better if you put in the work. Then the other 50% is split into two pockets. It's our actions in our mindset and our environment. So most people assume that our environment is the majority of that other piece. But in reality, our actions and our mindset is 40% of our happiness, and our environment is 10% of our happiness. Okay. So 4X is fully within our control. And that's why I'm in business. I'm in business because there is that 40% that we are fully in control of and dictates how we feel on a day-to-day basis.
So I just want to make sure I understand. My environment, meaning in my physical space, my house or my office or where I'm living, kind of what's surrounding me, that's only worth a quarter as much as the mindsets and the activities that I'm undergoing every day.
And beyond that, your environment is everything that's external.
Okay. Family, relationships.
Okay. It's everything that's going on, whether you got the promotion or you didn't, whether you closed the deal or you didn't, whether you get the car or you don't. That's literally only 10% of our happiness, but it's so much easier to play the victim mentality and say, and blame your life on whether the thing happens or it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. I believe that. I believe that. So that's kind of taking it into our own hands then.
To me, that's it. We have agency, and a lot of people are just waiting for life to happen. And I think that I like to say happiness is a choice. It's not an easy choice, but it's a choice by doing the things that make us happy. And a lot of those things aren't necessarily fun. Default is to not do the things that make us happy. Default is to snooze your alarm as opposed to get out of bed and go for the run. Default is to, take a warm shower as opposed to turn the last minute on cold, which jolts you awake and makes you feel electric for the next 2 hours. We have all these hacks that allow us to be the happiest version of ourselves, but it takes intentionality and effort. And in today's day and age, default, if we look at the average American, leads us to be depressed and obese.
Am I allowed to use the word discipline there, or is that a bad word these days?
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
I love discipline. And to me, discipline is freedom.
Discipline is freedom. So if we know what the things are that will lead to us feeling better and therefore being in a better mental state and therefore feeling happier, then having the discipline to move in that direction is going to wind up being beneficial.
That's 100% right, Alex. I couldn't agree with that more. And the thing is, especially what I see with entrepreneurs, we pay attention to what we measure. And it's very easy to measure the utilization of your company or the bottom line or, and all numbers, revenue, expenses, etc. It's hard to measure happiness, and therefore it's easy to ignore it. We're optimizing things that we're measuring. We're not optimizing things that we're not measuring. And so
you're right. I mean, everybody, everyone's running around wearing an Oura ring or a Whoop band or an Apple Watch or this thing or that thing, and they're measuring all these things about themselves. I don't know a lot of measures of happiness. I know some. I know that there's some general frameworks for this, but educate us on that point. Like, what are the things that we can be measuring there? How do we score ourselves on this fairly subjective sounding thing?
So I could give you, I'll start with just my definition of happiness, and then we'll get a little bit more scientific. But
okay,
this definition came to me when I was in my early 20s and going through a bit of my quarter life crisis. And I really thought about this sense of like, okay, I'm here somewhere in my 20s. Chances are, if I'm average, I'll live into my 80s. So I've got about 60 years left here on Earth. 60 years, give or take. Knock on wood, nothing crazy happens. All that life really is figuring out how to pass the time. Like, we complicate life with, I need to do this, I need to do that, I'm supposed to be here, I'm supposed to be there. All that life is figuring out how to pass the time until it's over. And knowing that, the question then becomes, how do I want to pass the time? How do I want to pass the time? And to me, optimizing that meant, how do I optimize for enjoying the passage of time? So happiness to me is enjoying the passage of time in our lives, because that's all we've got. All we've got is a number of years until it's over. So we might as well enjoy it. And that's where it gets interesting, because enjoy, the concept of being in joy, is different for everyone. And to me, entrepreneurship is a tool to enjoy the passage of time. If you are someone who has a higher risk tolerance, you're probably going to enjoy being on an entrepreneurial journey more than being in a corporate setting where you have more limited, first of all, emotional highs and lows, more limited freedom, versus someone who has a low risk tolerance. They probably like the corporate world more. There's more safety, more guarantee. So jobs are just tools for enjoying the passage of time. The same applies to everything else. Which tools do you want to pick up to enjoy the passage of time? So when I first do give myself a gut check of, am I happy? The question is, over the last 3 months, have I been enjoying the passage of time? Have I been enjoying the passage? And if the answer is no, then I know I need to mix something up. So I'm going to ask you a question right now, Alex. And feel free to answer or not answer. But over the last 3 months, how happy have you been on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being really struggling, 10 being you're the Dalai Lama of happiness. How happy are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
Well, let me preface this by saying that I made some pretty meaningful life changes around 6 months ago. I retired from / quit the company I founded, and that was a big deal, because it got me out of this sort of really stuck way of thinking that I had. I had this. I felt like I was in a prison of my own making, and that I was no longer of service to the company that I had founded, and that vice versa, the company was no longer of service to me. And for a long time, probably years too long, I was stuck in fairly unhappy about that, right? And I felt like, oh, I can't do anything about that. And I felt like this was somehow, it's like a problem that I needed to solve, if you will. So my happiness up until September was low. My happiness, so probably like a 4 out of 10. My happiness since then is like an 8 out of 10
Yeah.
because I took really drastic action. So to your point that 40% of our happiness is our mindset and our actions, I took really drastic action, made a lot of shifts in my life, and as a result, feel much happier now doing what I'm doing. So I've been able to do that because, partly because of the work that we do at Conscious Entrepreneur, partly because I finally got out of this like sunk cost mentality that I had. But it was really the action. It was the action of making a decision that I'm going to move from, this state where I feel like I'm, not giving my best to the company, and I feel like it's time for me to move on. I mean, the company was fine, but like, okay, it's time for me to move on. To I'm going to do that. That gave me a big burst of energy, and on top of that, then gave me a whole different frame around how I'm thinking about my life. So I would say over the last 3 months, to answer your question, I'm at 8.
Okay. That's beautiful. And I commend you for taking the action, because in today's world, the gap in happiness is not knowledge, it's action. We all know what we should be doing: exercising, meditating, journaling, connecting. Most people know those things, but they're not taking the actions to do those things. So the
Well,
fact
that's why I was asking earlier about discipline. Like I've also had this conversation lately with people about things like what food you eat or exercise or meditation. And to me, the discipline of doing these things, like simply saying this is what I do, these are activities that I take for my personal benefit every day or every week, like it makes it so much easier that I don't have to debate with myself. I don't have to discuss it with myself. I don't have to decide if I feel like going to the gym or not. I don't have to feel like meditating or not. It's like, boom, I'm just going to do it because that's the discipline that I've developed, because I understand the long-term benefits that are out there. And to your point, we're not struggling for lack of knowledge here. We're struggling for large part lack of commitment around making these choices.
right. No, and 100%. One of my core lines, I'd probably get this tattooed on my forehead if I didn't look funny, would be mood follows action. Mood follows action. And so many of us wait for the mood to take action. We wait until we feel energized to go exercise. We wait until we feel calm to meditate. We wait until we feel social to go out and be amongst people. When in reality, it's by exercising that we feel energized. It's by meditating that we feel calm. It's by being in the flow of connection with others that you feel bubbly and connected. So the mood follows the action, and therefore for high performers, as most entrepreneurs are, it's about having the right systems in your life that get rid of the decision, and just get you into action mode, so that you're not thinking, all of a sudden you've been up for 2 hours and you've already exercised, meditated, and journaled, and you're even more dialed for the next 8 hours as you really get what you need to get done. A lot of, I mean, James Clear talks about this, but we fall to the level of our systems. If you don't have a system around drinking, every happy hour you go to, you're going to have 3, 4, 5 drinks. That's going to crush you. Versus if you have a system of, I only drink on weekends and I cap myself at 2 drinks, then you're in a position to succeed. We can add systems to every dimension of our life to optimize for happiness and optimize for energy and optimize for feeling alive.
So what are some of those systems that we can use as entrepreneurs?
So number one, I'll give you one of my models is magic. I think we all want to feel the magic of happiness on a daily basis. And to me, magic is the 5 things you can do every day to be the happiest and healthiest version of ourselves. And the number one excuse I get when I talk about happiness is I don't have time for that. I have to take care of my kids. I have to do my work, all these other things. First of all these things can be done in 30 minutes or less. And second of all, if you don't take care of yourself first, you're giving everyone else in your life a watered down version of you. And they don't want a watered down version of you. They want the best you. And I like to use like the lighthouse metaphor of, if you're a lighthouse on shore and everyone else is a ship lost at sea, the only way they will find their way to shore is if your light is on. If your light is off, they're going to keep in the middle of the night, they're going to go the wrong direction. They're going to, go away from shore versus if your light is on, if you took care of yourself, they will find their way to shore and then they will be in a position to support other people. So first of all, we need to be lighthouses, which means making sure that our light is on. And then the 5 things to do that, I call it magic. M is mindfulness, A is activity, G is gratitude, I is inspiration, and C is connection. So again, mindfulness, activity, gratitude.
Give us those one more time.
Mindfulness, activity, gratitude, inspiration, and connection. And to double click in those, we can start with mindfulness. Mindfulness to me is being present. And that's probably the hardest thing to do in today's day and age, where we have so many distractions, especially with technology these days.
Yes.
Digital habits in terms of systems, that's one of the biggest ones I focus on, especially with entrepreneurs. The moment, for me, like the number one thing with phones, the moment we check our phones in the morning, we're acknowledging the world's to-do list for us as opposed to our own to-do list for us. You're checking your emails, you're checking your texts, and it's people telling you what to think about, as opposed to when you're sleeping, all your subconscious is coming through, and that is your genius. That is your intuition. This is what I should be doing to turn my dream into reality. We forget all that.
Yeah, otherwise I'm giving away my creative power, right? I'm giving my creative power away to whatever's on the thing in front of me, as opposed to like, what do I really want? What can I do today?
That's right. And if that goes back to intentionality and discipline, if you can be intentional about what is my priority as opposed to everyone else's priority, that's how you build something. That's how you build a business that's worth millions of dollars or goes public. It's not by, getting distracted right and left. It's got to be a centered, grounded place that your creation comes from. So to me, mindfulness is being present. And if we tie it to happiness as well, when you're living in the past, you're depressed. When you're living in the future, you're anxious. When you're living in the present, you're happy. So having a mindfulness practice can be a 10-minute seated meditation. It can be drinking your coffee without doing anything else, just tasting your coffee, knowing what it tastes like, knowing what it smells like, being fully with it. And it could be 3 breaths. So Alex, while we're here, why don't we just take 3 deep breaths together? And I want you to notice before we do this, notice your energy right now. Okay. Where's your energy right now? And to our listeners, maybe you can do this with us. Notice your energy right now. And then we're going to take 3 breaths. So breath 1, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Breath 2, in through the nose and out through the mouth. And last one, breath 3, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Now I want you to check in with yourself again. Alex, do you feel any different than you did about 18 seconds ago?
Yeah, I mean, remarkably, I feel calmer and more at ease.
So that's 18 seconds. Right. Meditation is the biggest one where people are like, I don't have time for that. No, you just don't want to do it.
Correct.
So that's mindfulness. Again, it doesn't have to be something drastic. It can be 3 breaths. If you are willing to commit to a meditation practice, try 3 minutes a day. Set a timer. There's also tons of great apps. A is activity. So that's moving your body. And
physical activity. Okay.
That can come in many forms. A lot of entrepreneurs tend to have exercise habits. But I would say there's some that put that to the side. The one thing that they are ignoring is their exercise and their diet, because their minds are so powerful. They can just power through anything. They're serial goal accomplishers, and they know they feel awful, but it doesn't matter because they're accomplishing their goals. Exercise to me is the easiest way to feel immediate happiness or immediate relief of stress. There was a study that found that 30 minutes of exercise 3 times per week is more impactful than the leading antidepressants on the market.
Oh, I totally believe that. I mean, 100% of the time when I go to the gym, I feel better afterwards than I did walking in.
Right. 100%.
So every single day, whether I want to go to the gym or not, I always feel better afterwards. For sure is the thing. And I will even go so far as to restrict my calendar so that, sometimes like I go to the gym early. I go to the gym at like 3:30. Okay.
Yeah.
If people put something, if something shows up on my calendar for like, I don't do calls after 3:30. I simply won't do it. And so the other day, someone, put a thing, oh, let's, we're supposed to catch up. We put it there. I said, sorry, man, like I'm not doing this. I don't do meetings at that time because that's when I go to the gym, because then I can get back at 5:30 and feel energized and happy and content for the rest of the day, as opposed to going later or whatever it is. So it's gotten for me so extreme that I will literally just block off that part of my day, refuse any meetings after that, and prioritize much of my day around that time versus what everyone else does, which is, oh, I'll go to the gym when I've got time. Oh, I can squeeze in, 45 minutes at the end of my day or at 6 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is. I just like literally like have it down there. That is my system for that.
Yeah. I mean, what you did was you made it a non-negotiable. You have a
Yeah.
system in place. You don't have calls at a certain time, that I am working out no matter what. And that is why your evenings are probably pretty fun. And you probably feel pretty good most
I
days.
feel like I just feel better, right?
Yeah.
And so and then guess what? If I feel like working at 7 p.m., then super. I'm awake. I'm like I can do more stuff. And if I don't, then that's fine. I can go hang out with my wife or do whatever. But it gives me like, first of all, a whole nother boost in my day, and then of course all the benefits around sleep and so on also.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. It's at the end of the day, do you want to feel like yourself when it comes to exercise? If you want to feel like yourself as opposed to constrained, a curmudgeon, I don't know the right word, exercise is a game changer. But then I want to touch on the next point, that people think, oh, I don't have time to exercise because I don't have an hour in the day. Do you have 5 minutes when you wake up to do push-ups and jumping jacks? Or go for a 10-minute walk in the middle of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you can't do an hour doesn't mean you can't move your body. And, I'm Alex, I'm not going to make you do, jumping jacks right now because we're on a podcast. But if we were in person, I'd say, I want you to notice your energy now. And then I want you to notice your energy after doing 20 jumping jacks. And
well,
it is.
I'll tell you what, Brian. I rolled from another meeting right into this podcast, and I was like, oh shit, I only have 4 minutes before my call with Brian. So guess what I did? I did 10 push-ups.
There you go.
So I was like, I need a tiny reset on my body. It's going to take me 35 seconds. So I did 10 push-ups and boom.
Boom. And your energy is electric, Alex. Let me tell you. So activity, that's again, it can take 35 seconds doing those 10 push-ups before a call, 100%. G is gratitude. This one is huge for entrepreneurs, especially because a lot of entrepreneurs are the highest performers in the world. And the highest performers in the world are generally motivated by not feeling like they're enough. So,
all right, gratitude is something that I think a lot of us struggle with. We understand the idea. Yes, be grateful. And then, let me tell you some of the things I've heard about gratitude, and then you can redirect me as needed. Okay. So, I need, like, quote unquote, I need to feel gratitude, right? Like, feel gratitude. It's very hard for me to feel gratitude when I feel like it's being imposed on me. Right. So that's one thing. Yeah. I've also heard that, like, it's better to be really specific. So not just like, oh, I'm grateful for my health, but grateful for something very particular. I'm not grateful because it's a nice day. Grateful for something very, very like really, really immediate, right? So I know that is something that comes up. And then for entrepreneurs, especially when we're going through the down cycles, which happen to all of us, the down parts of our business, it's really hard to sit there and be like, I feel gratitude about my declining bank balance. I feel gratitude because some customer just gave up on me. I feel gratitude because I just got a no here for, whatever thing I was doing, which, is just part of life as an entrepreneur. But when that emotional state comes up, I find it hard to actually say, oh, I'm super grateful about this. So how do we get from theory to action on gratitude? How do I snap out of that, those sort of thoughts around it?
So first of all, gratitude to that point makes us far more resilient in the downtimes because we're not fixated on the negatives in our life. At the end of the day, what gratitude does is it rewires our brain to focus on the good. And our brains are the same brains that our ancestors hundreds of thousands of years ago had, where we were worried about lions and tigers and bears eating us in the middle of the night, or dinosaurs even, you know? So our brains are built to focus on the problem to keep us alive. Focus on what's going wrong to make sure that we fix that problem so that we don't end up getting eaten or, get removed from the tribe. But we today live in a day and age where most of us are not worried about a lion, tiger, or bear eating us in the middle of the night. That's no longer a real problem. Yet we have the same brains that are fixated on the negatives, which leads us to constantly live in this state of stress and cortisol. And now, instead of a tiger, we have a phone in our pocket that vibrates with emails that we're expecting bad news every time. And we get a cortisol shock every single time we get that vibration. So what gratitude really does is it helps us focus on what's actually going well in our lives as opposed to what's the problem, which is our default. And by focusing on what's going well, we start to realize that actually our lives are pretty good. Chances are, for every one problem you have in your life, there's at least 6 things going really, really well. Even entrepreneurs whose businesses are tanking, 6 things going well for every one thing that's not going well. And Alex, are you a tennis player at all, or do you understand the game of tennis?
I understand the game. I'm a very mediocre beginner.
Okay, so if you were in a set of tennis and you won 6 games and you lost 1 game, what would that mean?
Well, it would probably mean I'm winning overall.
It'd mean you won the set.
Yeah, I won the set. Okay.
You wouldn't care about the 1 game you lost because you're now in the next set. It's 1-0. So instead of fixating on the one thing that's not going well, gratitude helps us get in the, hey, I'm winning the set and I'm winning life. And then that takes you to the next level of what we notice. Our life creates more of that, which is kind of the law of attraction. If you're noticing that you keep on winning, more wins end up coming into your life. Mm-hmm. So there's that element of we create more success when we are in a positive spiral. And when you appreciate the good in your life, the good appreciates in value. So that's a little bit about like the science behind it, why it works in terms of how you can do it. You just do it. And ideally, of course, you want to feel it. So, if you're going to write something down you're grateful for, please write down something that you're actually grateful for. Don't just write down, grateful that the sky is blue. Like, actually feel it. And I'll ask you right now, Alex, like, what's one thing you're actually really, really grateful for that you don't necessarily honor or acknowledge that often?
So I do my gratitude practice is not written. My gratitude practice is feeling. Like I tend to be someone with I feel a lot of this stuff internally. And the way that I do that is I do it as at night as I'm drifting off to sleep. And I what I do is I try to feel the experience from the day or whatever's been going on. And according to stuff that I learned from Sri Kumar Rao, who's been on this podcast before, and he came out and has spoke a couple of times at the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, what he says the ninja move there is, like the black belt move there is, to feel gratitude, period, not make it specific. So not make it specific to an event or a happening or something, something that occurred. Just feel the gratitude. Now, I can't always get there if I'm not feeling it or if I don't have a great day. But I have started to, I've been doing this long enough where I feel like I can simply experience gratitude. And that for me, like I can then physically feel that in my body. I feel that in my chest. And that's something that goes a long way. When I forget, or when I get off track, or when I stop and I can't remember what to do, the thing that works best for me is actually to think about myself and to think about all the things that I have done to put me where I am, and specific the intention that I had behind those actions and activities. So basically I think back, oh, what a good kid. Oh, what a good teenager. Oh, what a good early adult. Oh, type of thing. focusing on myself, because that's where I see the intention behind what I was doing. And that is something that I can tap into a lot of gratitude for, because it helps me see how I've been supporting myself over the course of my life.
Mm. I want to just double click on that you just did, especially as it relates to entrepreneurs. You found gratitude in how far you've come and how you got to where you are today. And a lot of entrepreneurs are really focused on where they need to go. They're really, really focused on this is where I want to be, or this is how much money I want to make, and this is where I'm at now. And they're living in a space of lack and feeling like they're not enough. And what you just explained to me was looking backwards and looking at, well, this is how far I've come, and this is all the things that happened that helped me to get to where I am today. And there's a recent term that's been more popularized, which is like the gain and the gap, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But before that, I used to say, we all have our to-do list. What about your ta-da list? Like, ta-da, all the things I've done,
Yeah, right.
And there's so much that had to happen to get us to where we are today. And us now, 5 years ago, would be so proud of who we are now. So it's so important to not just look at where you want to go and have your eyes set on the future. I think it's important to have a vision, because that's how we manifest and that's how we call it into our reality, but also find gratitude and find joy in the ta-da and all the things that have happened, and use that as momentum to keep you going. That's almost your rocket fuel.
Yeah, I like the to-do list. That's great.
I appreciate that. But I do love your practice, Alex, and the fact that you're so intentional with it. What matters absolutely is the feeling. For most people, they need to think of something to get to that feeling. If you're able to just drop into that feeling naturally all the time, you've reached enlightenment. You've made it. So the more you can do that, the better. But that being said, I'm a believer. Can I write down 3 things every day that I'm grateful for? 3 things that I'm truly grateful for. And again, that takes me about a minute to write those things and really honor that. And if I really want to even magnify the impact of it, if it happens to be a person that I'm grateful for, shoot them a text and let them know, hey, like the way you sent this email, or the way you talked to me today, or the way you do this thing for me, the way you care about me, is I notice it and it means a lot. Because then you're magnifying the impacts of gratitude because they're feeling it as well. So that's just, taking it to the next level if you want. And a lot of times the people who do the most for us, we take for granted. So we don't let them know as often as we should. So that's gratitude. Obviously, we could do a whole hour on gratitude, but we'll keep moving here, Alex. I is inspiration. And especially as entrepreneurs, we need to let our minds be free. We need to live in that imaginative place. And a lot of times we're just so focused on productivity that if we're not actually knocking out KPIs with all of our activities, we're not feeling good. We're not feeling productive. We're not able to be at peace, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, including myself for the first couple of years of the journey, don't know how to chill, or like this idea of doing less. How could I do less? What does that mean? You guys want me to sit and meditate all day? No, that's not what I want. I want you to let your imagination roam free. I want you to play with Play-Doh. I want you to, go on a walk and stare at the trees, because a lot of times that's where the magic comes through. And
Totally.
do you have a practice like this, Alex?
No, what I was just going to say was that the idea of do more with less, and also the gap and the gain that you were just talking about earlier, it's reminding me of the work of Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He's coming out to the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit in May here in Boulder, and so he's someone that I've learned a lot from around all that, and then also the idea of going for a walk, especially when your mind is a little bit clouded. That's something that Ryan Holiday, who came out last year to the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, was really inspirational about.
Yeah.
And the idea that like just simply changing our physical environment, like we were saying before, that does impact our happiness, but it also makes us kind of feel better and increases inspiration and just kind of let everything sort of shake out a little bit
Yeah,
is super important.
100%. I'm convinced that most of our problems can be solved with a walk.
Mm,
You know, like we're often, we go into the cave when we have a problem, when in reality we need to get outside.
yeah, right.
But yeah, finding some way to get your imagination going, and oftentimes it is conversations with other people. Oftentimes it's, who do I need to call right now that's going to inspire me right now to think
Mm-hmm.
differently, or what TED Talk do I need to watch, or maybe I just need to do the daily Wordle. Again, inspiration can come in 1 minute bites if it has to, but if we're not feeling inspired, the reason we feel inspired is because we know there's a piece of ourselves within that thing that inspired us, or within that person. I felt inspired watching the LA Marathon this weekend because I know there's a part of me that wants to do that at a certain pace or at a certain time or whatever. So when you see a speaker, and they have a message that resonates, or the fact that they're just speaking resonates, that's because you have a side of you that wants to be a speaker, or that wants to live up to that message that they're sharing. So that helps inspires us to be all that we can be. And as entrepreneurs, let's be honest, entrepreneurship is a self-actualization journey more so than anything else.
100%, 100%.
And so then the last piece is connection. And connection to me is probably the biggest piece of all. And that, the U.S. Surgeon General came out not too long ago and said that the biggest epidemic in America is not COVID, it's loneliness. Over 50% of America is lonely right now. And on the other side of that, there was a 75-year study out of Harvard that followed Harvard students and inner city Boston students over the course of their entire lives. And they tracked everything from how much money they made, did they have kids, what were their friends like, where did they live. The number one predictor of happiness was relationships, and not the
Mm-hmm.
quantity, but the quality of relationships.
Yep.
And so I think that we live in a world, especially with social media, where everyone has thousands of followers or connections, but do they really have quality connections and people that they can call at 3 a.m. if something's going wrong, people that they are dropping in with? I think that especially Gen Z, they don't even have the skill of meaningful dialogue because they were raised on social media, and they had the COVID era where they all lived on screens. So I think we're entering a world where the art of connecting is lost, and vulnerability and being human needs to be retaught. And I'm so happy that in the entrepreneurial communities, there is YPO and EO and all these groups where people are given structure around vulnerable conversations and asking for help. Because the reality is, if I walked up to you on the street, Alex, and said, how are you doing? What would your response be?
I mean, look, for the most part, all these conversations are just at the surface level, right? We're not
That's right.
really piercing through anything at all.
That's right. You would say, good you. And I would have learned nothing about you, Alex.
Right.
And I'd assume, oh, Alex is doing fine. Where in reality, I have no idea what's going on behind the surface. So an ability to ask better questions and an ability to be vulnerable, I think are two pieces that every person needs to learn, and every organization needs to learn to have connection and morale. Because a lot of young employees, they're probably more motivated by their friendship with their manager than they are by the work itself. And if you can build a culture where it's a group of friends who are working towards a goal together, as opposed to do this for the bonus, you're going to burn out on the journey of the bonus. But if you can, it can be about the connection. That's it. So,
That's a great tour of the 5 actions there inside of the magic framework, and I mean, a lot there for people to unpack. What's the best way to start? Which one is the one that you find most people are starting with?
I would say start with whichever one you aren't doing and feels the easiest to commit to on a daily basis. So I think that's different for everyone. Some people are probably already exercising every day, but they aren't doing any of the other ones, or they already have gratitude at the dinner table. Which one are you not doing and feels the most attainable? And can you do that for the next 2 weeks every single day? It's once you start showing up for yourself on a daily basis, you're going to notice the change. But so I'll leave you with that. Do whichever one you want to do. And I also want to just share like the reason why this is important for all of our listeners as entrepreneurs is, yes, it's great to be happy, but I know a lot of us fall into this trap of, well, happiness, that's not as important as my IPO, or that's not as important.
Feels fluffy. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels fluffy. I look at happiness as a tool. When you're not happy, happiness is everything. And you think about it. When you are happy, baseline happy, you are in a position to achieve so much more. You are in a position, you are thinking clearly, you're able to get clarity on what you want. You're able to go after everything you want in your life. It's like supercharging your energy, supercharging your brain so that any goal you want to accomplish becomes attainable. And I guess the last thing I'll kind of walk you through is just like the journey I see people on in terms of coaching. So I do a lot of happiness coaching. But at the end of the day, there's 4 phases I see people in. Phase 1 is stuck. They know they're not happy, but they're not really doing anything about it. They just are in that victim mentality. They're just, trying, they're just like, this is just what life is. Those people need to hit rock bottom, or they need someone to come into their life that wakes them up and says, no, this isn't what life is. Life can be awesome. Mm-hmm. That gets them to phase 2 when they're still in survival mode. They are aware that there's more to life and they want it, but they're barely keeping their head above water because, they're spread too thin or financially capped or have investors that are breathing down their neck and they just don't know how they're going to keep up. Getting from survival mode to thriving, which is phase 2, is all happiness. That's all. Are you exercising? Are you meditating? Are you journaling? Are you practicing magic? Are you, practicing gratitude? Are you practicing connection? That gets you into a headspace where you are firing on all cylinders so that you can continue into phase 3 and phase 4. Phase 3 is self-awareness, getting very, very clear on what you want. What is success to you? What are your values? What are your superpowers? What are your limiting beliefs? And that awareness of everything so that nothing can stop you. And then phase 4 is the self-actualization journey of now that you are firing on all cylinders because you're the happiest version of yourself. Now that you are very clear on what you want, let's turn that dream into reality. So a lot of people think happiness is the destination. No, it's a tool that gets you from surviving to thriving so that you can do all you hope to do with your company or with your life for that matter.
Fantastic. Look, that's a great place to wrap up. Super journey. I really appreciate the roadmap that is magic. And I like the way you're also linking this back to something that's meaningful for people. So if you're not showing up as the best version of yourself, you're not helping anybody, right? You're not helping yourself, your business, your family, anyone. And so this is a call to take care of yourself, to focus on what matters to you so that you can go out there and be the most creative and impactful person you can be. And if you don't do it, in that order, you're doing it backwards, it's not going to be very effective. So you got to do this work first. Brian Dubow, thanks so much for joining me here.
Thank you so much, Alex. Fun conversation. Appreciate you.